Yes. Well, yeah, if for everyone joining, Sofia Barnett and I were just talking. Sofia is a reporter at the Minnesota Star Tribune. She is all of 23 years old, and I was saying that she is getting quite a baptism by fire when it comes to on-the-job training as a reporter. She was saying what that your first week was when that terrible story with
Yeah.
the Hortman and her husband
Yes.
dog and
Yes.
other people were wounded, and that was just so heartbreaking. That must have been
Yeah.
really hard, and I was saying to Sophia, everyone, Sophia's 23, and, it's hard to cover stories like that, isn't it?
Yeah. It definitely takes a toll. I mean, our newsroom is just really working around the clock. Like my colleagues and myself, some of us have worked for 10 days straight. We're like truly working round the clock to provide live updates on our live blog as quickly as we can and just keep everyone as informed as possible because we know the story doesn't sleep. So
I know. Well, someone just said you really impressed me the other day. That was Karen O'Shana, who's I'm just hitting
thanks.
hello really quickly so that I can sit on. Um, Hi, everyone. I am at my daughter and son-in-law's house in Los Angeles. And so I'm trying to get everything organized. And before we dive into the show and kind of get an update from Sophia about what's happening in Minnesota right now and what has happened since we last spoke a week ago or so, I wanted to let everyone know that we're going to be announcing the new book for the book club after we really cover this story in Minneapolis and St. Paul and what's been happening vis-a-vis ICE, as we of course know. So anyway, stay tuned for everyone who's interested. You too, Sophia, if you have time, but I imagine you have more important things to do. But we'd love to have you be part of our book club. Part of the reason we did this is the news is so depressing and upsetting and stressful. Honestly, I mean, my anxiety levels, I can only imagine what yours are like, what yours is like, but my anxiety level is sort of through the roof. I find myself waking up in the middle of the night. I also have some friends who are fighting some very serious illnesses. But anyway, we just thought that reading fiction and reading books would be a nice escape from current events. So if you have the time or inclination, we'd love to have you join us,
Thanks.
Sophia. But anyway, so I'm just going to kind of set the stage. As everyone knows who's been following the news, Minneapolis has become the center of an extraordinary standoff between state officials and citizens and the federal government. Roughly 3,000 immigration agents have been deployed to the city as part of the Trump administration's Operation Metro Surge. And this past Saturday, many people were horrified once again when federal officers fatally shot a 37-year-old ICU nurse who worked at the city's VA hospital, a man named Alex Preddy. And he is the second individual who has been shot and killed as part of this effort. So, Sophia has been in the thick of it, everyone. She's been on the ground covering what's been happening. So we reached out to her last week and wanted to bring her back. So can you just give us a quick update, because there's been some movement and some changes
Mhm.
since we spoke last week.
Yeah, I think actually the day we spoke was the day before Alex Preddy was shot, so things are moving really quickly. And what has changed since then? I mean, I think people in Minneapolis were already just infuriated by the killing of Renee Good, also in broad daylight, also someone who was observing an ICE encounter, and people are still protesting. More people are protesting now. I mean, I think like I've been talking to people trying to get a sense of the mood, and it just seems like every time you ask, "How are you?" it's more of a formality because everyone's just down. And the people of Minneapolis are extremely resilient. I mean, we saw last week people were out protesting in sub 20 degrees. It's a little warmer this week, but we're still seeing that. People are outside the Whipple Federal Courthouse every day protesting. I was there on Sunday for a press conference that Greg Bovino did, and I saw again dozens of protesters who have been out there, and they're out there all day, and they're chanting at vehicles coming in. They have signs up. They're letting it be known that they do not welcome ICE in their city, and they're
And
not
Sophia,
making it
that
comfortable.
Is that where most of the protests are happening, in front of the Whipple building, or are they scattered across sort of Minneapolis and St. Paul?
Yeah, they're definitely scattered across Minneapolis and St. Paul, but I think Whipple has been a consistent location just because it's been a huge ice staging ground. So people are there every day because they know ice will be there every day. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of the changes. All right, Greg Bavino has left
Yes.
Minneapolis, and from
Yes.
everything I could glean, Sophia, he was really a very, very provocative, kind of carried himself, wore military garb, kind of weird Nazi almost garb, right? I mean, it was really crazy.
Yeah. There have been a lot of people drawing comparisons between the coats that the Nazis used to wear, the coats that Bavino wears, and I mean, there's an image circulating of him in a frame that appears to be doing the Nazi salute. I'm not sure where the photo came from, so I can't speak to whether it's been verified or not. But I spoke with a colleague today actually, who went to the Homan press conference and was there listening to him talk, and he said something that really stood out to me, which is that Bavino has much more of a military presence to him, whereas Homan is more of a diplomat. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. Obviously, this is really new and it's rapidly developing, and there's just a fire hose of news.
Right. Well, let's go through that. So Bavino, Greg Bavino, has left Minneapolis. Do you know what happened to him? Is he still involved in the effort? I mean, I think they realized that he was, this presence in Minneapolis that was quite confrontational, and they moved him out. Do you know where he is or what he's doing?
So last we have heard, or last we've checked, he was in South Dakota, and we know this because he posted a photo of himself with Mount Rushmore. We have not heard anything from him directly. DHS has not responded to several requests for comment about that. So honestly, it's hard to say where he is or what he's doing.
The other thing that happened is the two individuals who were responsible or involved in Alex Preddy's shooting, they have been they have, I guess, been put on a leave of absence,
Administrative leave?
administrative leave.
Yes.
Their names have not been released, and
No.
but unlike the first individual who was responsible for Renee Good's death, he was not put on administrative leave. Is that correct?
As far as we know, yes. As far as we know, yes. We actually did in request from comment to DHS inquire about Jonathan Ross and say, has there been any consequences for this individual? What is going to develop with this matter? And they just completely ignored that question. So they responded to the question that was in the exact same email right above, which was, can you confirm whether or not agents have been put on leave because of the shooting of Alex Preddy? So they're a little iffy about whether they wanna give us information about this or not, which has sort of been the case for months now.
The other development, Tim Walz has called in the National Guard. Can you tell us a little bit about the Guard's presence and what you're noticing? Because we hear that they are bringing, their video surfacing anyway of National Guard members bringing protesters donuts and coffee.
Yes.
Um, can you just tell us a little bit about their presence? How many guards people are there out on the street, and what is their presence like?
So I don't know how many are out on the street. I know originally they were supposed to just be staged and ready for action if something big were to happen or if something were to transpire that would, like, require them to intervene, but, I mean, what you just said is what we have seen and we've heard from protesters and witnesses, which is that the National Guard is being nice and they are trying to talk with protesters. They are handing out donuts and coffee, as we saw in that video that's been widely circulating. And I think like what that is a reflection of is sort of this thing that Walls and Fry have both been saying, which is that like the law enforcement agencies within our state are supposed to keep us safe, whether that's Minneapolis police, whether that's the National Guard, whether it's State Patrol, whatever. They're supposed to keep people who live in Minnesota safe. And I think something that's really unique about this, and I'm not sure if we touched on this last time, is that there's this really interesting sort of tension that's emerging where people are not totally sure how to respond to different members of law enforcement. Because right now, a lot of the anger, and this is something a lot of my colleagues who cover George Floyd have brought up, in 2020, a lot of the anger was directed at the city. That's why we saw a lot of riots and a lot of destruction in the city. But right now, a lot of the anger is directed to the federal government. So people are looking at the National Guard and they're kind of like, well, you're here to keep us safe. Like, these aren't the people who are directly inflicting harm as people would argue during George Floyd. It was police officers who were directly inflicting harm. So I think it's really interesting with the National Guard coming in and having this very cordial relationship with
Also,
people.
Tim Walz, the governor, has called them up. So instead of Donald Trump
Right.
sending National Guard, so that's a big difference. And I think people realize
Definitely.
that it's at the behest of the governor versus the administration. I
Yeah.
read that there are Alaska National Guards people who are perhaps going to be deployed if they invoke the Insurrection Act
Mhm.
uh, but if the administration does that. Have you heard anything about that?
No, I haven't heard anything about that.
So there's it. It sounds like things that Homan is trying to de-escalate the
Yeah.
situation. Bavino's out. Homan had a press conference. From what I saw, he was sort of blaming the protesters for provoking the ICE folks. Tell me your impressions of the press conference and if you feel like he has de-escalated the situation in any way.
I mean, I will say I think just Bavino leaving is a natural move toward de-escalation. I think like a lot of he was a very visible face. He was at a lot of raids. He was at a lot of these confrontations all around Minneapolis. And I think that visibility, I mean, removing that piece does de-escalate things naturally. And I mean, Homan is less visibly known. He's new. People are sort of unsure of his history. And I think, I mean, when he began his press conference, he was like talking to members of the press, and he was like, "I hate reading scripted remarks, but I'm going to do it anyways." Actually interacting with them in a way that is just totally different from what we've seen with Bovino, who actually like very rarely takes questions from members of Minnesota media. So it was, I mean, it's generally a very different attitude. It seems to be, and just even in the way that they conduct themselves as individuals publicly seems to differ. So I imagine that that will also help with de-escalation. I think the real question, which is something I'm trying to work on today with some of my colleagues, is if ICE agents are leaving Minnesota, how many and when? I think that will show more about whether things are going to de-escalate than anything else.
Well, there are also, developments in that President Trump had a conversations, 2 separate conversations, one with Tim Walz and one with Mayor Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis. What can you tell us about those conversations? Because it did seem to at least lower the temperature a bit, and that's my impression. They were at least communicating, and I've also seen it reported that President Trump is very worried about the images that are being projected across the country coming from Minneapolis. He's all about and a lot of people feel that some of the actions by ICE have been extremely performative and that they are actually working against the administration. So he's a child of television and obsessed with television. I'm not sure how much he looks at things online, but because he's very worried about these images that are being projected, he did reach out to Tim Walz and Jacob Frey. What can you tell us about those conversations and the impact they might have had?
I mean, I will say it seems like the killing of Alex Preddy is a bit of a tipping point, and I hate to say that because, I mean, another citizen, Renee Good, was killed, and that also could have been a tipping point, but I think, like you're saying now, it's with all the images circulating, with Minneapolis very obviously being just in the middle of international, news and just, like, such a huge point of focus, I imagine that there's probably some saving of face that's happening, and I think it's interesting that Fry and Walls had these phone calls with Trump, but I think it does signal a move from the administration to sort of maybe hopefully cut some of the theatrics of this. And I don't want to say that killing citizens in broad daylight is theater, but I think like you are saying, it's these images are coming out and they're not looking good for the administration. And it's turning Republicans against Trump. It's turning supporters of him away. And I think like he has sort of come to terms with the fact that he needs to acknowledge that. And it seems as though his public facing attitude about ICE enforcement is shifting too.
Did Homan lay out any conditions under which he would be willing to pull some personnel out of the city?
He said that it would require total cooperation from local and state officials, and I'm not entirely sure what that means. I think we're all kind of wondering what that means. And that's really interesting because Minneapolis is a sanctuary city, and Mayor Jacob Fry has countless times, as you know, has said that we will not cooperate with any immigration enforcement. And Police Chief O'Hara says the same thing. So in practice, it's hard to imagine what that would really look like.
Can you talk a little bit about the role of the Minneapolis Police Department? Because I read that it is that they are not supposed to interfere or be involved in these operations in any way. And yet, some people I think are frustrated that they're not doing more to protect the citizens. And, quite frankly, Sophia, I'm kind of confused about what exactly they are doing, what they're being told to do. I know that they're
Totally
being
fair.
some off-duty officers, officers of color are being approached by ICE agents and treated
Yeah.
aggressively, and obnoxiously by some of these agents. Can you just talk a little bit about the police department and its role?
Yeah. So what I know for sure is that, like you said, they are not supposed to interfere with any of these enforcement actions, but they are responsible for crowd control. So if people are protesting and they're making a lot of noise, more people are showing up, the crowd is growing, it's growing, and the agents have a reason to fear for their safety or public safety, which again, that's vague and could easily be up to different levels of interpretation from different people. But then that's when we see MPD getting called in to do crowd control. And I think we might have touched on this a little bit last week, but that becomes a little confusing for people when they see other law enforcement officers standing there and telling them what to do and saying back up and things like that. And
Well,
they have to
especially I
issue.
read I sorry to interrupt, but Sophia, but I read that ICE agents have police in some cases that on their backs or police,
Mhm.
writing, so it's very confusing.
Confusing. Yeah.
With who, right?
Very confusing. Yes. Extremely.
So, tell me, so are they gonna get more involved, less involved? I know the police chief has worked very hard. He came in, I believe, in 2022 after George Floyd, is that right? And tried to clean up the department. And there was and really the Minneapolis PD has worked extremely hard to work with the community
Yeah.
and do more community policing and have a better
Mhm.
relationship with citizens. Um, and sort of how are people feeling about the police chief and his role in all this?
Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately he's been saying the right things. And what I mean by that is he's been saying things that the majority of people living in Minneapolis agree with. I would say the majority of Minneapolis is extremely pro-immigrant, and it's a diverse city with a lot of immigrant businesses, huge Somali diaspora. I mean, just so many different people live here, and I think his response to ICE represents that of the people living in Minneapolis, which is we will not comply. We will not aid with any federal immigration enforcement actions if you ask us to. I think it's going to be really interesting, like what you were saying, to see what happens with Homan saying that there's going to have to be some level of cooperation. Because I think when you have these figures like Fry and O'Hara who have so publicly and sharply even said that they are not going to be participating in immigration enforcement and they oppose ICE, I mean, for them to do a 180 would be really surprising. Um,
What's the
yeah.
status, Sophia, of the investigations? Obviously, I'm going to be talking to a former police officer who is also a sociologist trained at Princeton and Harvard, a professor at John Day College of Criminal Justice about sort of crime scenes and about investigations. And he has really examined the videotape of both the killing of Renee Good and Alex.
Mhm.
But what is the status of these investigations as far as you know? Are Minneapolis authorities still being pushed out? I know I'm going to talk to Keith Ellison too, the Attorney
Great.
General of Minnesota, after I talked to Peter Moskos, this criminal justice professor I just mentioned. But tell us from the ground, do you know what's going on with that?
Honestly, Ellison will be able to tell you so much more than I can tell you, but I can give you some important background about sort of the battle between the feds and local agencies in trying to go through with this investigation. And the Trump administration, I mean, ICE has said that this is a use of force review, which is really different from like a crime scene review. And it's a completely different process of looking at evidence and examining what happened. I mean, they're not trying to ask questions about like, did Preddy have like, did he brandish a weapon? Did like what actually, like, it's a matter of, did the officer abuse his force in that moment? That's the question. It's doesn't matter the moments leading up to the crime scene. It's not a thorough investigation of what actually happened. It's more of a, did the officer use force in a way that he was not supposed to? So that obviously kind of restrains what they can and cannot look at and what they will choose to look at and choose to ignore or sidestep. And that's, of course, why Minneapolis and Minnesota leaders are so frustrated, because they want this full review. They want to be able to determine what actually happened, especially when we've seen, and I've reviewed dozens of videos from different angles of Alex Preddy being shot, and no video footage do I see him brandish a gun. No witnesses told me that he brandished a gun. That is something that the federal government has repeated multiple times to attempt to justify what happened, and is largely contested. And we ran a story about the things that Bovino and Noam have been saying to try and justify what happened. And several of their key claims are unfounded. And I mean, I think for the feds alone to investigate this would be just a a loss.
And what's so frustrating, I think, for people watching this unfold is they make these claims before any investigation was able to take place. They
Right.
make claims based on, their interpretation of videos at the scene, and
Mhm.
it's just so honestly so irresponsible of them. But they are in this defensive posture that they're trying to rationalize what happened immediately. And that's why I think you're right. It's so important to have a full investigation. Let me ask you about a couple of other quick developments
Yeah.
since we talked. This individual named Chris Maddle, he was the
Mhm.
Republican candidate for governor of Minnesota. He's also, incidentally, a lawyer representing Jonathan Ross,
Yeah.
the ICE agent who has been accused or allegedly killing Renee Good. So he announced on Monday he's dropping out of the race in a really pretty interesting and I think revealing statement. Tell us why he dropped out and the impact this has had.
Yeah, I think the best line that really speaks for all of it is when he said that he can't support the national GOP's stated retribution on the citizens of our state, nor can I count myself a member of a party that would do so. I mean, I don't really know what more I can add to that. I think, like, it very clearly shows, like we were talking about earlier, this pattern of Republicans defecting, or not even defecting from the party, but defecting from Trump, or defecting from this administration and what they're doing and how they're carrying out these enforcement actions. I mean, it's reaching people are reaching a breaking point. Republicans are reaching a breaking point. Leaders are reaching a breaking point. And I think, along with the idea of Trump sort of trying to save face and getting Bovino out to de-escalate the situation, like, I think ultimately there's only so much that you can peddle and put forward about something before people realize that something's wrong. And I think what this reflects is a growing trend of people realizing that something's wrong.
And though Maddle is representing Ross, the ICE agent isn't facing charges or a civil suit. The attorney is helping him navigate the process of accessing legal representation from the Justice Department. And the Good family's lead lawyer represented George Floyd's relatives and told the Wall Street Journal he expects to file a civil lawsuit in the case. So he dropped out of the governor's race, but he is still continuing to represent Jonathan Ross.
Mhm.
Let's also move to the story about 5-year-old Liam Caheo Ramos. He's 5 years old, as I said.
Yeah.
He was into custody in his driveway. I know that he's been visited in, I guess, the center,
Dilly.
in the
It's
detention
yeah,
center, right?
it's in Dilly,
Um,
Texas.
yes. So tell us about that. I think Congress Senator Castro. I think was
It was Reps Castro and Crockett from Dallas. who
Right, right.
visited him. Yeah, they visited him recently, and
Sorry, yeah. And they actually had a conversation with the people who were head of the school
yeah.
where Liam was taken from. Um, Tell us the latest on that case, and is they I know that Congressman Castro said that he was gonna be coming home soon. Do you know that to be the case?
I have no idea when he's coming home. I know that they reported that he's lethargic, he seems sick. The head of Columbia Heights Public Schools, which is the community he belongs to, said he has a fever, and the conditions that have been described from inside the Dilley facility sound pretty abysmal. I don't know when he's coming home, and I wish that I did.
Yeah, someone's asking if he's receiving medical care. I'm so worried about him. I think so many people were. I think he sort of captured the imagination of so many people with his little blue hat, which apparently he
Mhm.
lost. He doesn't have his hat anymore. Stacey Harwell just said he has one pair of pants. I think just the idea of this little boy being taken and probably terrified
Yeah.
uh, from his school, along with his father, I think has really encapsulated sort of the cruelty and heartlessness
Mhm.
that that is happening with this operation. But other kids have been taken. A 17-year-old was removed from his car Tuesday, taken by an armed and masked agents. A 10 10-year-old fourth grader was detained by ICE agents with her mom. Another 17-year-old and her mother were detained when ICE agents pushed their way into an apartment. So, what do you know about those cases? Stacey Harwell is saying a 2-year-old.
Yeah, I know about the two-year-old. Honestly, this happens so frequently that it's sort of hard for one person to keep count, and I hate to say
Yes.
that. But I mean, this happens every day. This happens what you are seeing on the news, what you are reading, what you are listening to is happening in live time every single day, around the clock, in so much more of a greater capacity than you could imagine.
Let's talk about what people can do, because so many people on who follow me on Substack and other social media platforms want to know what they can do to help. And what's been quite remarkable is to see the people of Minneapolis and St. Paul kind of form these community groups. They're bringing food, they're going grocery
Mhm.
shopping for people who are too afraid to leave their homes. They're doing all kinds of things. They're standing watch in front of daycare centers. Tell us a little bit about how the community has responded in terms of helping each other. It makes you want to move to Minneapolis, not right now necessarily, but it seems like such a caring community of people that are really, taking care of each other.
Yeah, I feel very lucky to live here. I think everything you just said is completely true. There are so many activists and businesses and community members who are mobilizing and organizing and in communication with each other to meet various needs in the community. And like you were saying, some of that is done through people delivering groceries, businesses donating groceries, donating food. Some of these donations are for people who are afraid to leave their house. Some of them are also for people who are out there protesting or observing or just generally serving their community in that way. Like you were saying, standing watch outside of daycares or bus stops, things like that. And that's been very heartening to see. And in general, a lot of this is happening outside of these group chats. It's happening through like community members taking someone else's kids to school because they feel afraid to drop their kids off. We see that in the small scale every day too. It's not just the organizers who are getting this done and rallying the community to support each other.
It's really amazing. As you said, they're doing it in freezing temperatures, you
Yeah.
know? And it's not easy running around the city when it's this cold. Final question, then we're gonna go to our next guest. And Sophia, I so appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Someone asking me on social media, what's the one truth you wish people knew about what is happening in Minnesota? I know you're so focused on your own coverage, but you probably also I'm sure you and your colleagues see how this is being covered nationally,
Yeah.
and obviously it's being covered as two very different narratives because the country is so polarized. But do you think there is something that people are missing when they are looking at what's happening in your city?
I mean, I think something that in the lines of the most essential truth, the thing that I wish that everyone could grasp is just the lawlessness of it. I think like there's even this sense internally where I'm talking to the lawyer to try and figure out protections for what happens when we cover protests. And there's this sense of like, if they don't have a permit, you don't need to show them anything. Or like, if they have a judicial warrant, then you show them things. If they don't have a judicial warrant, you don't show them things. And I think like what people really need to understand is that these are completely unprecedented times where that doesn't matter. I mean, obviously, even having citizenship in its own is not enough to protect you from potentially being pulled over or detained. And I mean, I think the same goes in all of these mechanisms that we're thinking about, right? Like a warrant is a warrant, but also when these people are in your face and we have language of immunity being thrown around by federal government,
And
people in the
also,
federal government, like, I mean, what can you really do?
there were also these directives. They weren't a search warrant, but these were administrative directions that basically violated the Fourth Amendment,
Yeah.
that lawful search and seizure. And I
Hmm.
and so are they still doing that? Are they still going into people's homes without a search warrant?
I mean, as far as we are seeing and reporting, yes,
Well, I'll talk to Keith Ellison about that.
and you should.
Yeah, anything else you want me to ask Keith Ellison?
No, I think you're the expert. You probably got it
Okay.
covered.
I don't know. I'm really not in this story. You are, Sophia. Anyway,
That's
thanks
true.
so much for talking with us. We're going to move on to our next guest. But again, appreciate your time. Everyone, I just want to point out Sophia is a pretty relatively new reporter with the Minneapolis Star Tribune. She's 23 years old. Incredibly impressive to be able to do this. It's not necessarily easy having these kinds of conversations, but well done, Sophia, and keep up the good work, and let's stay
Thanks.
in touch.
Great to talk with you. Take care.
Okay, thanks so much. Bye. Okay, now we're going to the person from John Jay. Uh, Here we go. Sorry. I want to make sure team KCM, it's Moskos or Moskos? Mose with a long O. His name's Peter Moskos. He's a former Baltimore police officer, and he's the author of a book called Back from the Brink Inside the NYPD and New York's City's Extraordinary 1990s Crime Drop. Hi, Peter. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for doing this. You're a sociologist trained at Princeton and Harvard. You're now professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. And he's a really great person to speak to about the killing of Alex Preddy, ICE's response to protesters, what is proper crime scene procedure, and how local and federal agencies are interacting. Peter, before I continue, will you pronounce your last name for me?
Moskos. Or if you really want to be Greek, you can say Moskos, but I'm not too picky.
Okay.
Moskos is good.
Okay. Peter Moskos. Okay. All right.
Nice
Since I'm not
accent.
Greek, I'm just going to call you Peter. But you have actually done an extraordinary job. I heard you talk about this on NPR, reviewing really frame by frame what happened to Alex Preddy. And as a former police officer and now somebody who really studies police procedure and various crimes, Peter, can you walk us through what you saw on that videotape when Alex Preddy was murdered?
I saw an incredibly disorganized law enforcement response. I saw policing out of emotion and anger. I mean, I think it is important to put in the backstory, and this is not at all to defend what happened, because I think they shot and killed an unarmed man. It's a bad shooting, but you
Well,
have these.
he did have a gun. We should point that out.
Yeah, that was taken off him,
Right.
and at that
And I want
point,
to get to that
yeah, that's
because I
important.
know.
I mean, I'm not yeah, it's yes, he did, I hesitate because I don't trust the party line from the government here. We don't I mean, don't know for sure, and they immediately started with lies about him being an assassin out to inflict maximum damage and asked us to not believe our lying eyes. I mean, so that it set a bad tone for future investigation and just spew lies at the beginning.
And
But
by the way, I just want to point out, Peter, I mean, he was legally carrying a gun. Uh,
apparently he was a legal permit holder with his gun. and that gun was removed from him when the agents went in, and shortly after the gun was removed, he was shot and killed. I mean, the first and we can get into I would like to go back a bit in time later, but the important part is that the man was killed, and when you're trained to use lethal force, you're trained to stop a threat. You're trained to identify a threat and stop a threat. And at no point, even when he was armed, did I see a threat. But then, particularly after the gun is removed, what are you shooting at? And then the shots continued. There is human reaction time. It takes about a quarter of a second to react to a threat, and about the same or a little bit longer to stop reacting. But this went on beyond that, less than half a second time frame here. So I mean, having dealt with threats in Baltimore City, where I was a cop briefly many years ago now, um, I was like, what are they doing? How could they be policing this way? Who's in charge? Who is the sergeant? They so outnumbered both the woman that was pushed and then Preddy. Um, if you have a reason to arrest him, and keep in mind, obstruction is a federal crime. So if you want to protest in that way, you're opening yourself up for arrest. But there's a long tradition of civil disobedience and putting yourself in an obstructive position. But it is a crime, a minor one, but a crime. And if you have, I think there were 6 officers around him. It should not be hard to take him and put cuffs on him. If you have to take him down on the ground, as we would have done if we knew he had a gun, uh, you do that, and one officer grabs each limb, and then you have another officer sort of perimeter watching the crowd, and you put the cuffs on. It's not that. I mean, it's physical. It's not that hard. We did it all the time. We were good at it.
Especially given that you said they were so outnumbered,
Yeah.
and he was assisting a woman who had been pushed, right? When they shot him, correct?
Well, he assisted the woman that the ICE pushed for unjustifiably. Look, someone was murdered. The push to me
No,
wasn't
what
good,
I'm
but
saying, he was trying to assist this person, which to me doesn't seem like he was posing an imminent threat. He was
he
saying,
wasn't an imminent threat. I
right.
mean, I it's gonna take me a lot to change that opinion because I've seen so many perspectives of the video. Um, he could still be arrested for obstruction. Okay. I mean, charges probably wouldn't be pressed or whatever by a federal prosecutor, but he was not an imminent threat. So the force was unjustified, but it was the chaos leading up to it that is just so sort of shocking that the tactics were so poor, that there didn't seem to be anyone controlling the situation. They didn't seem to have a plan as to how to detain a guy who's he was resisting. There's also excessive use of seems like punitive use of pepper spray. Um, I mean, it's yeah, no, it's ugly from start to finish there.
Celia Carroll, who's watching, wanted to know where the gun is now. And that brings me to the question about these crime scenes that are not being preserved. Or, I don't know, I guess you would call it a crime scene, or you'd call it a scene where excessive force investigation.
It's a crime
General,
scene. When someone is shot, it's a crime scene. Even if you later determine no crime was committed, you treat everything like a crime scene and you treat all deaths like murder until you know otherwise.
and I'm curious, how should these crime scenes, both in Alex Preddy's case and Renee Good's case, these crime scenes are not being treated in a
Preserved is the
way,
right word used, that you preserve a crime scene.
but that's not happening. And tell me why that's so important, Peter.
Well, it's important just to get to the truth of what happened. It's important should there be a criminal prosecution because lack of preservation of a crime scene is and should be used by any defense attorney to get their client off. It just opens up, contamination. I mean, it opens up a mess. Now here there is video. and perhaps it's less important to preserve the crime scene, but let me say it's always important to preserve the crime scene. I say it's less important because this isn't really a whodunit. Though I'm not certain who fired which gun, and how many people were involved. A part of preserving a crime scene is collecting that evidence, and doing it in a professional way that has a chain of custody. So no shenanigans happen to guns, to bullets, to anything, no washing your hands afterwards. These are all very basic, you know, crime scene investigation issues. It was particularly bad when Good was shot and killed because they packed up and left. Um, I mean, that blew my mind. I mean, for in a normal shooting, again, if you handle it a lot, it becomes a routine. You know, some might say too routine, but you tape off the area. Uh, bigger is better than small. Um, you start canvassing for witnesses.
I was going to say you interview witnesses, and they're not even doing that.
No, because they don't seem to be interested in any investigation here. I mean, that is sort of the crux of the problem. Now, it is complicated if you have a hostile crowd, um, because they're going to probably get in the crime scene as well. Now, in the Goods case again, along with the officer insulting her after he shot and killed her, guy said he was a doctor, and they refused to let him approach somebody who may have still been alive. Probably not. I don't know. I mean, it's not. Look, scenes are chaotic. They don't want to be there. They feel like, correctly, that the public doesn't want them there. Um, it's the whistle. They're human beings, so they react to stress, and that probably does contribute to bad decisions and bad policing. But so I'm saying it's rare that these things are ever perfect in the real world. It happens fast, but it's just it's stacking up one bad thing after another. That I know a lot of cops, real police officers who, are wide-eyed looking at this and thinking, I mean, a lot of people say, I didn't think my department was that great, but wow, compared to this, we're going to win awards for good policing here.
I wanted to ask you, you were talking about how disorganized it all seems, and in the heat of battle or whatever, things can get chaotic. But y- I'm curious about their training because it seems to me that they
We
have
all are
recruited,
curious about their training.
and I've really tried to get to the bottom of this and tried to read articles, and it seems that they are woefully undertrained for the job at hand that they are being assigned to do. And to your point, there doesn't seem to be any hierarchy, like who's in charge, what's going on, any kind of procedure that they're following. And additionally, everything seems, at least when Bovino was there, especially, very sort of performative and almost theatrical in terms of how they're approaching this. And some of the language that I have heard these ICE agents use with some normal citizens, if you raise your voice, I will erase you. I heard one ICE agent telling somebody that. So, can you just address kind of who these people are, how they're being trained, and people are asking who's in charge when these ICE agents are going out to find people?
Yeah, I mean, look, even people doing bad stuff, they're still human beings and people with families and those who love them. I think some of them probably have good intentions. Look, Border Patrol did not sign up for this when they went on the job. Um, ICE agents who have some time on did not sign up for this either. Um, yes, maybe they signed up for arresting the worst of the worst and people who are actually criminals, but not all the bad things that you mentioned with your previous guest. Um, and then I'm very leery of recent ICE recruits who, get less than 50 days training as opposed to 6 months for a real police officer. Um, th- the fact that the agency has grown in such numbers means that, of course, standards are low and have been lowered. Um, they're not a professional police operation. I mean, keep in mind, and this may be a more semantic difference, but I still like to make it. Policing is a state and local power because of the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. We don't have federal police officers with police power, with the exception of the postal police, but let's leave that aside. We have executive law enforcement officers. Now, often de facto, that's similar, and states can give them police power. But I just think in this time, it's important to emphasize that policing is supposed to and constitutionally is a state and local function. Now, they can enforce federal law, and states can give them police power, but I think it's important to put that distinction out there now because our local police are trained better and the standards are higher. And a lot of ICE agents wanted to become cops a few years ago and couldn't. And that's why they joined ICE. And
What
police
by
standards have
that?
lowered as well.
They weren't equipped, or they weren't able to become police officers?
Yeah, there are a lot of people who want to become cops, and for whatever reason, they're not hired. And so some become ICE agents, some become correctional officers. I mean, look, these are both jobs, and correctional officer is a very tough job, but there's almost no CO out there who would not prefer to be a police officer. It's better paying, the working conditions are better. So and of course, this does not apply to everybody. But between the fact that yes, ICE is often now they're getting a big signing bonus now, so maybe people are more interested if you get 50 grand for joining ICE. But that raises another issue, which is they apparently, and I would love to see it in writing to confirm it, but by all accounts, there's a quota system where you can get bonuses for making arrests. That goes against the very foundation of professional modern policing. Police are not supposed to be bounty hunters. I mean, that was part of the reason in the 19th century, what we have today was established based on the British model and Sir Robert Peel. They're supposed to be part of the community. So it's a very antithetical model to policing, and they're making the police job tougher because they're uh, demanding police attention. And they're turning the public against. I mean, we spent the past 10 years trying to improve policing and increase police legitimacy, and then suddenly we have this, and it's just like, well, I wasn't
And I
expecting that a few years ago.
and I think in the wake of George Floyd, the Minneapolis Police Department has worked very hard to do, as I mentioned to Sophia, the reporter I was speaking to do a lot more sort of community policing. And you're right, to have these federal law enforcement people just kind of dropped in to the community. And you're right, like this is not what border patrol agents do. They're not working in these necessarily in these urban areas. They're not really trained properly to do this. And that's why I would really like to talk to somebody who leaves this whole operation and can talk about sort of how they're trained and what they undergo to even make them equipped to do this kind of work.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of border patrol agents that are really not wanting to go to work every day because of that, because they weren't trained for this, because they didn't want to do this. And suddenly they feel with some justification that they're an occupying army in Minneapolis and elsewhere. I do feel, individually sorry for this. I feel for them, but elections have consequences, both for us who didn't vote for Trump and for those who did. I mean, we got to win the next election.
Can you talk a little bit about the interaction with the Minneapolis police and the ICE agents? I was talking to our previous guest, Sophia, about this.
Yeah,
And I
that was
read that
interesting.
they're not really allowed to get involved, and they do crowd control. But it seems to me it's a recipe for disaster because it's unclear who's doing what. And can you talk about sort of that strange interaction between local law enforcement and these ICE people?
Well, I can speak about it in general. I'm not in Minneapolis. I'm in New York City, so I defer to your previous guest on how she described the situation. But I can say that Minneapolis does not have enough police officers. That is a legacy of Floyd and Minneapolis politics. They have about 500, give or take. Per capita, that's half the national average. It's a quarter of what we have in New York City. I don't know how they function, and to some extent, they don't. Um, they have a murder rate above the national average. I mean, it's uh, there. If you have 500 police officers, you have about 100 that are on duty at any given moment. I mean, unless you call them all up, but on any given moment, you'll have 100 officers. You can't handle all of this and also do normal police functions. So you have to choose. They would need more cops if ICE weren't in there, but especially with this, they're in a very tough position where they have to triage and they have to make choices.
And also, I know that a former Marine did a piece for the New York Times about, and this is really true of law enforcement across the country, how increasingly militarized they've gotten. Can you talk about sort of these ICE agents and the heavy military gear that they seem to be using, and kind of the extremely aggressive tactics that they're employing?
Well, it seems that they have less justification for that than a normal police department would. I am not a weapons expert, and I don't want any law enforcement to be hurt. But it's excessive. It's imagery. I mean, and combined with the fact that they're wearing masks, combined with the fact that we don't see any legitimate accountability, you put it all together. Yeah, it's horrible. But I don't think we should focus just on the weapons involved. But we might ask why they need those weapons. If you're going after armed people, that's one thing. But clearly, some of it is for theater. Some of it is for, well, I mean, it's a political show. I mean, if it were, why are they in Minneapolis at all? One could say, it was because Trump wanted to prove a point. Maybe Trump backed down, by the way, today. It is interesting, and now he seems willing to talk and negotiate. So, I mean, that's a move for the bet. Look, at some point, um, people have to protest injustice, but we also have to make, all sides also have to de-escalate. It's very scary what could happen. So, um, you know, the center must hold in America, and this is stretching that from both sides. Yes, that's why I go back to the idea of the protesting that has had a long history of a track record of success in America, which is goal-focused civil disobedience, and saying, nonviolent resistance. It both gained the moral high ground and it actually accomplished the goals of the civil rights movement of the time. Um, I don't.
Do you think protesters, I mean, I thought it was interesting Tim Walz was talking about the importance of recording things on their phones. But it does seem, and obviously that's critically important, but is there anything that maybe that protesters might have been more mindful of in terms of sort of getting into people's faces and kind of just increasing the temperature between them and these agents? uh
It's
you
tough,
know
Katie. It's tough because look, if ICE came to take away my students who are undocumented or my neighbors and friends, I would be out there too. And but it is risky. I mean, I would not take a kid to a protest. Um, I so you have to balance this. I don't think there is a clear answer, but if we don't want ICE is less likely to shoot people. Um, I mean, in a non-stressful situation. I saw an analogy, I think, on Twitter yesterday. Just because the pilot in a plane faced turbulence, that's not an excuse for him to crash the plane. That said, if the pilot's facing turbulence, I hope everyone in the plane wouldn't be shouting in his ear and blowing whistles. Not that it's not morally justified. It's simply you're escalating, you're obstructing, you're making a stressful situation more stressful, and bad decisions happen then. But so you have to weigh this, and I don't have the answer to that. If Trump backs out of Minneapolis, I would say then the protests were in the end successful. Of course, 2 people were shot and killed. It would also help if cities went back to a sanctuary city definition from a decade ago, where they did turn over violent criminals. I think that's the morally correct thing to do for immigrants. Uh, so that's one thing, and then and then you can say, okay, look, if you're here and working hard, that's not a problem. We'll work to make you legal. But politically, and again, I go back to we have to win elections. Politically, it's hard. It's tough to be on the side of protecting criminals because a few people are, not many, not most. I'm not saying that at all, but I don't know why we don't want to turn over criminals to federal prosecution.
Stacy Harwell is saying, sorry, you guys, my phone charger isn't working properly. Stacy Harwell is saying, please stop referring to these as protests.
Why?
Oh, she said we are observing. Um,
Well, there have been protests as well. Well, I mean, look, it's goes back to 2020. There were protests. There were riots. There's a combination. There's a spectrum. There were protests at the Minneapolis airport of, I believe, religious people passively resisting protest and protesting airlines for subcontracting their services out to ICE. Okay, that was clearly a protest. Um, yeah, some people are just observing, but some people are. I mean, the goal is to obstruct. People are against what ICE is doing, so it's not just observing. Um, it's some people are, and some people are obstructing, and some people are protesting. There
somebody
should be
asked,
observer. I think there should be all of those to some extent, but it's a little
yes,
disingenuous to say everyone's just observing.
somebody asked, can the federal agents who murdered U.S. citizens in Minneapolis be prosecuted by the next president?
They could be prosecuted by the state. Now, this is getting, I don't think there are clear answers here with federal supremacy. Um, they have qualified immunity, but that immunity covers on-the-job actions if they are reasonable. So, if it is considered not reasonable, um, then which is conveniently the exact same standard generally used to convict a cop in state court to show that the actions as judged by a officer at the scene are unreasonable. Um, so they're not totally immune because the administration said that. Now it would
Right.
be
Well, they walked that back.
yeah, that's the way they do it, right? They say crazy and then say, "Oh no, we're only half crazy now." So there could be now that would be a big deal, and it's right. I don't think it's happened yet, but there have been conflicts between federal law and state law throughout American history. School integration comes to mind, and the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 comes to mind. So we faced these before, but there's no clear answer to that. Uh, could the next administration? I suppose so. I want to. I am not a lawyer, so I mean, I
Well,
know
you
a
know
little
what?
bit
I can
about
ask
law.
that question to Keith
Yeah,
Ellison
you've
because
got the
I'm
attorney
here.
general coming up. That's the
I've got the
perfect
attorney
question.
general coming up next.
If
But
you could
Peter,
also
thank
ask him about state prosecution, I would appreciate that, and the federal qualified immunity. I'd love to hear his answer to that.
Okay, I will. And if you don't hear me asking it correctly, please just write it in the chat or tell my
Okay.
producers. Thanks so much for your time, Peter. Really
Well, thanks for
appreciate it.
having me and for having this discussion.
Okay, take care. I hope
You
I'll see
too.
you again. Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye. Bye. All right, now we're going to go to Attorney General of Minnesota, Keith Ellison, who is going to join us. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm having trouble with my charger, but hopefully it will last. Uh, AG, okay, I've got it. Hey, Attorney General Ellison, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, can I call you Katie? I mean, I've seen you on TV for years, so I feel like I know you, even
You
though I
can
don't.
please feel free. I'm sure that I probably interviewed you at some time or another, didn't
Yeah,
I?
once or yeah, maybe once or twice, but still, you're the great Katie Couric. So there you go.
Please. Well, you're very kind to say that. And you've been a very, very busy person under a lot of pressure in the state of Minnesota. Can you just first and foremost tell us a little bit about your reaction to this influx of ICE agents, this so-called Operation Metro Surge?
Yeah, this is an attempt to obtain compliant, obedient behavior from the state of Minnesota on a range of issues. One is the way we choose as a state to engage around the issue of what the federal government calls sanctuary policies, but are the right of Minnesota to have such policies as a sovereign nation. This is the federal government is trying to obtain certain things. We're in court with them regarding voting rolls. We're in court with them regarding other sort of records. But they're in a battle with them on this. So the federal government has said, what we cannot get from you from with a court, we're going to get from you with 4,000 ICE agents deployed into your city with guns, who are no happy to use violence if that's what they feel like using. So, in other words, you know, the states of the United States predate the United States as an entity, and the United States and the states of the United States are engaged in what we call dual sovereignty and federalism. And what the Trump administration is saying, done with that. We don't have no federalism. You don't have any sovereignty. We're going to send armed men and masked men to your state unless you do what we say. And that is what's going on. But we say no, and we're never going to quit. We're never going to back down. We're going to insist on our sovereignty. We're going to sue over it. We're going to march over it. We're going to write awesome songs over it, like Bruce Springsteen just did. We're going to resist this, and we're going to maintain American democracy. So that's what it's about. They're trying to bully us into giving up our right to make Minnesota a unique, interesting, very cool place.
Let me, may I call you Keith since you're
Please.
calling me Katie?
That's my
So,
favorite
Keith,
thing called.
so let me ask you, I'd love to backtrack just for a second for you to explain what it actually means to be a sanctuary city.
Great question, because Minnesota really is not a sanctuary state. They use, I mean, Pam Bondi and people like this throw these terms around all the time. But under Minnesota state law, Katie, when you are brought into a Minnesota prison or jail, you are asked about what your nationality is. And as you're processed through, that information is available. And if ICE shows up, they're going to pick you up. But what we won't do and what we cannot do is hold you there beyond our purposes as a state. So if the state says, well, Joe Jones is getting out at 12 o'clock on Tuesday, I says, oh, no, no, no. Can you hold him till 3? We're like, no, he's out on Tuesday at noon. We told you that. It's your business to get there. And so we're not we're not really a sanctuary state in that we have a state law that requires that communication, but we will be sued if we held people in confinement just to wait for ICE to come pick them up. And so that's the problem. They want us to basically violate people's rights to complete their business in state court and go about their lives. And that's the problem. They're trying to they're trying to make us do their job, which we're not paid to do and we're not authorized to do, and would be a violation of people's rights if we tried to do it.
Can you tell us about the latest? I know that the federal government said the state couldn't investigate what was going on and what happened with Renee Good or Alex Preddy. I just talked to an expert. Are not preserving crime scenes. They're not gathering witness statements.
Right.
What is the state of Minnesota? What are you doing in terms of launching your own investigation into these killings?
We are. So when Alex Preddy was shot and killed on Saturday, that day we went and got an temporary restraining order from a judge to command the federal authorities to preserve and protect that evidence and to prohibit them from tampering or altering that evidence. And then we were in court the next day on Monday, and we're doing everything we can to preserve this evidence, and we are going to preserve this evidence. And there are other things on the Good case that I can't mention, but trust me, for all your listeners, we're doing everything we can that will allow us to effectively retain and get that evidence, so that one day there will be a decision either by a grand jury or a prosecutor to present those charges, and it's possible that it could be charged out. Though I'm not gonna come in front of you it would be unethical as a prosecutor to say, oh, we're gonna charge this, or oh, we're not gonna charge this. We shouldn't say either one. We should complete our investigation, then make a decision. But nobody involved in shooting these Minnesotans should think that they got away with anything.
But isn't the federal government, Keith, keeping a lot of the evidence and keeping a lot of the information and
Yeah,
keeping whatever away from you all? So it's very difficult for you to properly investigate these cases without
that's
all the
true.
important information. So how are you handling that?
Well, there's a lot of video out there. We're collecting that. Hennepin County Attorney's Office and the Attorney General's Office have portals where we've asked the public to say if you saw what happened, if you were there, share it with us. If you have video, share that with us. If you have photographs or any kind of information you think is relevant, do that. And the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, which is our state investigative arm, they are collecting witness statements, collecting video. They're cataloging that in an evidence procedure that allows for that. And so we're doing the best we can. And I'm just going to say, cases go to trial every single day in America where where as a prosecutor, you wish you had the gun, but somebody threw it in the river. It doesn't mean the person wasn't shot. It doesn't mean you don't have witnesses that are willing to testify to the shooting. It doesn't mean you don't have video. So yeah, sometimes you have to put a case in front of a jury where you don't have everything you wish you had. But quite honestly, I would not want to be a federal agent where it's like, well, my friends got a hold of it and now it's not unavailable. Because that looks like a what? What does that look like to you, Katie? Isn't there a word we call that? Starts with a C, cover up, you know? And sometimes it's not the crime, it's the cover up, right? And if you're in, look, Pam Bondi and Steve Miller and all these people who are running our government, they say that Jonathan Ross is perfectly innocent, didn't do a thing, and that the victims of these things are domestic terrorists. Well, if that's true, hand over the evidence. Let's do an investigation, and I'm sure that your claims will be borne out. But maybe they don't really trust that. Maybe they don't believe that, which is why they're doing and saying the things that they're doing and saying.
They're asking for voter rolls. Talk to us about that. Like, what, as some kind of, you give us our voter rolls, we may cooperate more with state officials. Can you talk about that and how bizarre that is?
Well, it's like, look, we're going to send 4,000 armed agents to raise hell in your state. And we're going to shoot some Minnesotans. We're going to scare a whole lot of Minnesotans. We're going to demand papers of people who look foreign. We're going to do all that. We're going to have a wave of terror across your state. But if you decide to do some things that I think I need you to do, maybe we can back off. Well, that's called coercion. That is commandeering. It is prohibited by the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution. They cannot do it. It's illegal. It's unconstitutional. And that's why I sued them. And that's why I believe we're going to win.
Well, talk about that lawsuit because you're representing state and local officials,
Right.
and it involves the 10th Amendment. Can you explain what you're doing legally for the non-lawyers who may be watching?
Yeah. So let me take everybody back to civics, okay? So way back when the United States was formed, the 13 colonies said, okay, we will be part of the United States. But we got to retain certain rights to ourselves, and you, federal government, will have certain rights for you. You will be supreme in certain things, but all the other things, that's our business. You stay out of my business, we'll stay out of your business. And so that's what the 10th Amendment is sort of about. We all have been told and taught that the separation of powers and checks and balances is because we got a judiciary, we have a legislative, and we have an executive branch. Well, that's just part of the check and balance. The other part is the states who retain power over a wide range of things. Think about it, Katie. Isn't voting qualifications? Is in Minnesota, if you're a felon and you're out, you can vote. In others, if in other states you cannot. So voting is state, marriage is states. Whether you have a right to an abortion nowadays is a state matter. I mean, you're the licensing for teachers, medical professionals, lawyers is state. So much of what we do in our lives is governed by the state. And what Trump is saying is, all of that state stuff, no. The central government tells you what to do, and you damn well better do it, or we're going to send 4,000 men with guns who would mass to make you understand that it's in your best interest to do it our way. And so that is what is happening right here, right now. And well, hasn't Trump said, "Oh, the press is a bunch of liars and fake news, so they're trying to collapse First Amendment freedom of the press." He says, "Oh, the legislature, Mike Johnson is my little flunky, and so we've collapsed the legislature into the executive branch." And Trump says he has the power to tax and raise duties and tariffs, which the Constitution says Congress has, but he has usurped this power. And so, what is he doing all the time? He's intimidating judges. We're going to impeach you. That judge is a fake judge. The media is a fake, and Mike Johnson is my little, you know, sycophant, fetch it boy. And so he's collapsing institutions of power into himself. And this one now is the state authority. And so that's what he's doing. He's trying to, what does it mean to collapse all institutional power unto yourself? That is a definition of authoritarianism, tyranny, dictatorship. And that's what we're looking at.
And what are you doing in response? What is Minnesota versus Nome?
Well, we're suing them, Katie. We went to court and we said this is illegal, unconstitutional, and Judge, we need you to issue an order to stop Operation Metro Surge. And if you would allow me, Katie, I would like to tell you,
Please.
your listeners, a little bit about Operation Metro Surge. Ordinarily, Minnesota is within a 5-state area that ICE operates out of. And normally, for the whole 5-state area, they have somewhere between 80 and 200 people who work in the area. That's in ICE ever since 9/11 and then we established the Homeland Security, and it's been about that number, fluctuates no more than 200, 150, no less than around 80. We now have about 3,500 of all immigration officers in America. We have around 10 to 12% of all of America's immigration agents right here, right now, looking for something to do, harassing, bullying people, doing all kinds of horrible things. And what we're saying is that this massive escalation is about punishing Minnesota. And it's not just punishing us. Trump said he wanted retribution. He said that in a True Social post. Bondi says, yeah, well, maybe things can go back to normal if you do give us what we want. That's illegal and it's coercive. But at the end of the day, we are in court with her because she's trying to deprive us and rob us of our sovereignty. And I'm telling you, if she can do it to Minnesota, she can do it to Wisconsin, she can do it to Montana, she can do it to New Jersey, she can do it to New York. She can do it anywhere. They can do it anywhere they want. And so this is why this issue is everyone's concern. Every American, every state should be like, no, no, hell no, absolutely not. This is all of our business. And so we have asked people to file amicus briefs in favor of our legal proceedings. We've asked people to come to our state and to hold community meetings and to hold different events to really drive up public interest and concern. And so that's what's going on. We are fighting for American democracy right here, right now. It sounds overblown because whoever would think that we ever have to fight for American democracy? But we do, so we better step up to it.
And can you talk about the basis in which you're filing this suit, what you're claiming, and how it involves the 10th Amendment?
Yeah, well, so our
Which was,
claims
by
are,
the way, interestingly, Keith, used by Southern states, right, during the Civil
yeah,
Rights Movement?
very true. The Southern states said that we get to have Jim Crow segregation based on states' rights. And they weren't wrong that there were rights reserved to the states. But the Constitution says equal protection under the law, and the 14th Amendment said due process, equal protection of the law, equal citizenship. So while you do have states' rights, you don't have the right to discriminate against people based on their race. So the southern states saying states' rights were actually wrong, but Minnesota's not wrong because we're not taking any rights from anybody. In fact, Trump's mad at us because we give people rights. He's pissed off at us because we do welcome the stranger. We tell our immigrants come to our state, refugees come to our state. We even elected one of them to Congress, and he's real mad about that. I don't know if you've ever met Ilhan Omar, but I
Yes,
would.
I have. I interviewed her right when she was elected.
Well, you were right to do so. She's a wonderful person. I was in Congress right before her. She took over my seat. I like to claim a little bit of her success because hey, she's younger than I am, and I've always been there to support her, and I still am. And I've always tried to mentor her in however I can. But she is a brilliant, amazing leader all on her own. I don't take any credit for that. But she is sort of one of my favorites, right? So I mean, but that's what we do in Minnesota. We say that we believe that if a woman wants to make a reproductive choice on her own, you can do it in Minnesota. We will protect that right. We say that if you want to be gay or bisexual, trans, you can be that in Minnesota because that's your business. If you want to marry somebody the same sex as you, we don't see how the government has a role in that. That's up to you. If you can put up with them, it's fine with us. And so this is how we live in Minnesota. And Trump says, no, you got to be my version of what you should be. We want you to look more like Florida or Texas. And so that as they attack federalism, they're really trying to kill the unique, interesting, you know, nuance of one state to another. They're trying to destroy the state's prerogative to be a laboratory of democracy as was contemplated. And, you know, by the way, we're the 28th state when it comes to immigration, right? I mean, we have a lot of immigrants here, but there's 27 states that got more. And so, I
Right,
mean,
right.
you know what I mean?
Why do you think?
So why
Why?
would
I'm
we
I'm
be the target of
curious.
all this? You know what I mean?
I was going to ask you that question. Why do you think Minnesota? I mean, I have theories, and there's been a lot of speculation having to do with Tim Walz, having to do with the Somalian population in Minneapolis, the
Right.
Somali diaspora, as we were saying earlier, and they came to sort of get a lot of Somalis, but there's so many U.S. Somalis who are U.S. citizens
Oh yeah.
that now they focused on Latino people in
Right.
Minnesota.
Well,
So
here's the
why do you
thing.
think Minnesota was targeted, Keith?
Well, I'll tell you, Katie, I think Minnesota is targeted because Minnesota values are inclusive, are democratic. We believe in public investment. And that's so, yeah. So he doesn't like Walls. But what is Tim Walls? Tim Walls is a white man who likes to hunt and fix trucks, who cares about everybody, who he was the football coach and he was the faculty sponsor of the Gay Straight Alliance. He does he well, Trump can't tolerate a white man like that because he's trying to say, wait a minute, we need all white men to be on this side, my side, and we don't want none of them to care about people of color, gay kids, diversity, a fair economy, unions, environmental protection, all of that liberal stuff. Tim Walz is walking proof that you can be a flannel wearing, John Deere wearing, hat wearing hunter and perfectly masculine, regular dude and still be compassionate and care about others. So he's deeply threatened by Tim Walz. Tim Walz is a demographic that he feels he owns, and Tim Walz isn't obeying him. But we elected Tim Walz because Tim Walz is a hell of a teacher. He is the kind of guy who can be the football coach and the faculty advisor for the Gay Straight Alliance, who's just a compassionate, caring person. Now now, so that's just the Tim Walz story. There's others as well. You should go back to the 1948 speech that Hubert H. Humphrey gave at the Democratic Convention in Philadelphia, and he said, we need to walk out of the shadow of states' rights into the bright sunshine of human rights. And there's a book called Into the Bright Sunshine, and it's about Hubert H. Humphrey, mayor of Minneapolis back in those days, became a U.S. senator and a vice presidential candidate and a
Right.
president candidate. But he was this leading edge of attacking Jim Crow segregation, on the leading edge of an inclusive economy where the government invested money to help ordinary regular people of all colors. And then after that, you got Walter Mondale, who helped lead the band in terms of fair housing, and who was such an iconic, progressive, inclusive leader of all people, one of my personal mentors and heroes, and one of the people who convinced me that I should run for attorney general, leave Congress and run for attorney general, Walter Mondale. And then Paul Wellstone, who was leading,
Who
who
went to
was
my high school.
there you go. And yeah, who was speaking up against the war. You may recall in 2002, everybody, America's ready for war, right? But Paul Wellstone said, I'm voting against the war in Iraq because it's the wrong thing. And he turned out to be right about that. And so, but we have this legacy of people that now we got Ilhan Omar. We got, people who are we believe that the people we want representing us are going to absolutely throw down for the best interests of all people. We don't hate our neighbors. We believe in our neighbor. I don't have to know you to help push your car out of the snow. In Minnesota,
And you
we all
believe
do
in
it.
multiculturalism.
We believe in multiculturalism. We're proud of when Trump says that the Somali community is garbage, well, we believe in sending them to Congress, So so this is why he's targeting us. We voted against him 3 times, by the way. Like 1, 2, 3. And he got up and he's really mad about that. His feelings are really hurt, that we wouldn't vote for him. So that's why he doesn't like Minnesota. Now, I don't want to tell you that we've solved every social problem known to mankind. Um, you know, we have a lot of problems here. We're still overcoming challenges, but we're trying to work on them. I'll give you a quick example. In Minnesota, if you had a bunch of like Black and Latino and poor white kids who didn't have any summer jobs, and if you went to go to the local chamber of commerce and you said, hey, what are you going to do to help these kids get summer jobs? These Minnesotan businessmen would probably say, well, what do you think? Well, what if you all hired a few of them? Okay. Stuff like that happens in Minnesota. You know, they called it Club Fed. That's what they called it. And it was a summer jobs program. And it was just a bunch of mostly rich white businessmen who said, I care if these kids, many of whom are kids of color, don't have anything productive to do in the summertime because they don't see them as just some foreigners or some others. They see them as their own kids. And they don't, the melanin differences are not the main thing for them. So if they care about kids so again, I don't want to paint the picture that we've solved every problem, but in Minnesota, if you get a good idea and you want to do good for people, there are people who will back you up. And some of them got power. Some of them are in a position to help, and they do.
That's why they call it Minnesota nice, right?
Right.
Let me ask you just real quickly. Hold on 2 seconds, Mark. I was hoping my son-in-law. I'm at my daughter's house in Los Angeles, Keith, and long story short, I left my charger in a hotel room, and this charger is not working very well. So I just want to make sure I don't lose you. But can you just tell everyone the status of what is going on with uh, both your lawsuit against Christy No and also the status of the investigation? Because there have been legal rulings on both of those things.
Right. So we had our hearing last Monday. It went well. The judge then ordered the government to do supplemental briefing. What does that mean? The judge said, you need to give me some more paperwork. And what was it all about? She was saying, tell me why this is not punitive action by the federal government. And if it is punitive, is it your position that the government gets to be punitive? Right? So, briefing on that issue, that she didn't ask us to brief anything. So that matter is pending, and we're looking for a ruling, and we're confident and feel good about it. I don't have any inside information, but I believe in this judge. She is a very thoughtful person. She's an I dotter and a T crosser. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the other matter where we had to go to court to preserve evidence, that's in status quo. They have to preserve the evidence. The other matter, the good matter, we're taking action, which I can't disclose, to get the evidence. But I can't really tell any more than that. And then another matter pending is, they subpoenaed me, and I guess I'm under criminal investigation by the Trump administration. Well, we're taking legal action to push back on that. So on a wide range of matters, we're into it with the federal government. Oh, and Katie, I didn't tell you, we've sued Trump over 50 times, right? This year,
Right.
we sued him from the very beginning on birthright citizenship. We sued him on the National Institute of Health grants. We sued him on supplemental nutrition assistance. We sued him on electric vehicle infrastructure. We've sued him on over 50 times. And Tish James has sued him about 50 or 51 or two. And Rob Bonta in California, where you are, he's sued him a bunch of times. And and Dan Rayfield up there in Oregon has sued him a bunch of times. And we all of us Democratic AGs, we come together and we work together. Now, somebody might want to know, well, how many times have you won? We haven't lost yet.
Oh,
We've had
yeah.
some rule.
But
We've had the,
but
we,
what impact is it having, Keith,
oh,
all these
we've kept
lawsuits?
literally billions of dollars for our state. So we know that there's a problem with Trump obeying court orders. But I will tell you that for the most part, they have obeyed. Whenever we've sued them over money and the court rules in our favor, the money starts again. So these programs that we've sued them over, we've been winning. Now, some of these cases are going to end up in the Supreme Court. Will we win there? We'll see. But I feel good about it. And I'm going to tell you why. Because what Trump is doing is so incredibly illegal. When Congress appropriates money and a president signs it for the benefit of a state program, the later president doesn't have the authority to just say, that money, I'm taking it back. Why? Because Congress has the authority to spend money, power the purse, right? We've all,
Right.
we grew up with that. And so how does he just get to take it back? Well, he doesn't. On the tariffs issue, we sued him on the tariffs issue. The Constitution couldn't be clearer. Congress has the authority to raise tariffs. Why? Because if you're going to raise taxes, import taxes on everybody, or their representatives should have the ability to weigh in on how that's going to affect their local community. Trump said, "I don't give a crap about your local community. I've decided that I'm tariffing you, and if you don't bless me with some gifts that I find pleasing, I might just keep them there. Or if you're real nice to me, I'll lower them." You notice how he does that? It's all extortion. He got gold bars from the Swiss and a gold Rolex from the Swiss. He got a $400 million plane I think he got that from the Qataris, right?
Right.
He
Qatar. Yeah.
Qatar. He got a golf course from the the UAE people. He got another golf course, I think, in Vietnam. He's got a big crypto thing from a bunch of different people. This guy,
He's getting money from networks that are paying him off basically so they can merge with other companies.
right? So if you got a pending antitrust matter, they're sealing their lips and just taking care of them a little bit, making sure that they put up the money for this ballroom that was never approved by legitimate construction people. And so, I mean, he is a grifter like no other. This guy makes Richard Nixon look like a priest. I mean, this guy is steady robbing and mobbing, and all these Republicans seem perfectly comfortable with it, um, which is amazing. So this
Do you
is
think
where
that's
we are.
starting to shift? Do you think that's starting to shift? I know they're going to be voting on ICE funding. And do you think some Republicans are starting to get a little queasy about all of this stuff?
You know what? The answer is yes, and I think a lot of them have been queasy for a while. I mean, hats off to people like Bill Kristol, who's, might be a conservative, but he's a man of integrity, and he'll call wrong wrong, but then, Adam Kinzinger, these are folks who I
But I'm talking
probably.
about Republicans who are now on Capitol Hill, not
Oh,
people.
oh, yeah. Well, sure. Okay, yeah, you're right. Thanks for specifying that. Yeah, I think so. I mean, Comer has voiced some concerns about some of the actions of the Trump administration. I heard about 7 or 8 Republicans voted no on this pending supplemental bill, and that so I've been watching the proceedings and have heard that there's been a number of votes that we didn't ordinarily expect to see. So I think there is a shift, but I think most of them are still wondering, is his popularity such that he could make me pay a political price if I go against him? Because they know he's vindictive as the day is long, right? So that's kind of what they're worried about. But I'm hoping and praying that their patriotic duty wins out over their uh, political need to try to, survive Trump. So
Right.
that's what we're seeing right now.
I want to let you go, and you've been so generous with your time. I'd love to do this again if you ever feel like
Oh,
it.
sure.
This is super helpful. But I guess just getting back to your state, you know, Bovino's out. I know that Mayor Fry and Governor Walz have each had conversations with Donald Trump. It seems like they're starting to realize this is not really looking very good for the administration, what is happening in Minneapolis. And how do you see this sort of ending? Do you see them retreating from Minneapolis and St. Paul? And do you see them pulling out these ICE agents? What is your feeling in terms of what may happen in the next few weeks, even months?
Well, their rhetoric has already begun to change. I mean, Tom Holman came into town. So let me just tell you, I've never talked to Christy No. I've never talked to Bovino. But Holman comes in and he's talking to all of us, which is progress. We're not going to give 1 millimeter, not 1 nanometer on a Minnesota sovereignty. But, we are open for a conversation if there's something that, you know, is reasonable without us sacrificing the sovereignty of our state. So those conversations are being had. We're starting to hear rhetoric like they're ready to, go back to status quo. There is a pending motion in court, and they might want to leave before they're kicked out. You know, and so the thing is that the rhetoric is changing, but I'm hearing from my staff who's monitoring things constantly that we're really not feeling it yet. And so I'm like, we're going to keep on suing, marching, litigating, protesting, protecting mutual aid until we see it actually change. And if I may say one thing, even though I think Bovino is not a good public servant, I actually found it interesting that they chose him because he had a reputation for brutality. They picked him for that reason. And then he goes out and acts brutal just like they wanted him to do so. And now he's out based on PR, proving that Trump doesn't love Bovino. Trump doesn't love Marjorie Taylor Greene, doesn't love really anyone, and is more than willing to throw anybody under the bus. So if you're a conservative, be careful about who you hit your cart to, because the loyalty you're expressing will not be returned.
I
And
can
so I
think
hope
of someone he loves.
himself.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's the one. I mean, that's a pretty short list, but there's no loyalty. And so, I just tell people, you know, do the right thing because you're not going to get the loyalty you're expecting. I mean, and now we're hearing rumblings about whether Nome is on thin ice. We've been hearing for months
Stephen
that
Miller.
Stephen Miller. We've been hearing Hegseth is on thin ice. we've been hearing, all these people who have basically, been, they've harmed America for him. Well, now when he's done with them, they're like a to him, they're like a piece of tissue paper that you blow your nose in and throw it in the garbage. It's useful to you right up until you got to blow your nose, and then it's just a mess and you get rid of it. And why people would ever line up with him is a mystery to me.
What can people do to support the state of Minnesota, to support the people out there in the freezing cold who are trying to take a stand and saying not in our state? What can people outside of Minnesota do?
Donate to a charity of your choice. I'm not going to pick one out because I regulate charities in Minnesota, but a reputable good charity that is helping people do mutual aid. Please support those. They're online. You can find them. Because I regulate them, I cannot favor one of them. That's something you can do. The other thing you can do is you can come to Minnesota. I mean, the fact is, come here, come to a community meeting, come to thank the people who are standing witness at the Whipple building. You can do that. You can also, if you're a lawyer and connected to a legal organization, we need amicus briefs to support our legal filings. If you are a journalist, come tell the story. And you can telling one person's story is illuminating the whole story. And so do that. If you're like a good songwriter, be like Bruce Springsteen and write a story about the streets of Minneapolis, or like Jesse Wells, or like others, but use your artistic ability. So there's a lot and here's the main thing here. Thank you for allowing me to answer this question because, Katie, I want to just assure people. I had a young person say to me just this morning, and I love young people. I used to be one of them. Said to me, I'm not going to support none of these politicians till they get ICE out of Minnesota. And I said, dear one, ICE is here because of an election. We cannot say we're not going to go as strong as we can to protect the vote. We saw what happened in Fulton County with the subpoena at the election office. They're demanding our voter rolls. We cannot win an election and get gavels back by starting to really go get people elected in next November. It's got to start now. You got to go to precinct caucuses, participate in primaries. You got to do election protection now. We need people to sign up for being voter officials, election officials. We need people to really start thinking about the election right now. And once you sign somebody up to vote who's never voted before, then what you could do is you can invite them to a community meeting, a protest, whatever, so that they stay involved. But we need people. I mean, here's what I want to ask people to do out there. Go look at your state and figure out when you did the best you ever did in the midterm the last 20 years. Take that number and put on 5%. And then what you do is you take that number and divide it by the number of days between now and election day. And that is the number, that is the number of people you got to go get to pledge to vote every single day. Do it with a team, do it with a group, but make sure that 2026 has the highest voter turnout in the history of the United States for a midterm. I mean, if you don't, I'm not talking about Democrat or Republican. I don't care. But if you love American democracy and you believe it can be better and you think it's being attacked, get out there and explode the vote like you've never seen it before. And that means we need people doing voter education. We need people doing election protection. And we need people being very aware that they're not going to do subpoenas at Fulton County in Georgia if they're not trying to manipulate the election. Trump is in the 30s in terms of approval ratings, and he's going to drag their whole ticket down. They cannot win straight up. So they're going to win they're going to win another way. And if you and I sit back and say, that's fine with me, I'm more voter, all I'm going to do is only protest with a sign. I'm like, you can protest and do election protection.
How worried are you about election integrity? We're seeing all these things happen, and yes, we can. People can try to get a bigger turnout, but how worried are you about sort of them manipulating and messing with the results?
That's why we need people doing election protection like right now. That's why we need, if you're a lawyer, come on in and sign up and work with people like Norm Eisen, who you may know, and work with people like Mark Elias, who you may know, work with Eric Holder, who you may know. These guys are working hard on election protection. And so that we can make sure that we are protecting the vote. Because as Democrats, you beat us, then you beat us. But we don't want to be cheated, and we're worried that that could happen. So we need people to get involved. So I'm not just saying voter turnout. I am saying voter turnout, but I'm also saying election protection. I'm also saying come volunteer now. I'm also saying maybe you can disseminate information on problems when it comes to the vote, and raise these issues early. If they normally have, I don't know, a voting booth at your college, not and this year they don't have one. Let's start making a big deal about that now. Maybe we file a lawsuit to get a voting booth at your college. But there's a whole lot of people who were not naturalized citizens in the last election and were not old enough to vote in the last election and who somehow just sat it out because they didn't like the choices in the last election. There's a whole lot of people to organize. And I'm asking you to go places you normally don't go. Go to the go to the to the manufactured housing place. Go to the neighborhood where you don't necessarily speak the language. But just remember and have faith that the heart knows the heart. And if people know that you're there to help them, they will trust you, they'll work with you. But we got to break out of our silos. If you're from an urban area, go to the rural communities, go to the farm country, listen to them tell their story about how they lost their farm because Trump did a tariff on China, which resulted in retaliatory tariffs, which destroyed their soybean industry and drove up the cost of fertilizer and everything else. The
Or
rural communities,
people have crops who are not being harvested because there aren't enough workers.
because they got cows that aren't being milked because there's not enough dairy workers. They got all kinds of problems. But the Republicans and Trump have done really well in rural areas. But ask yourself, if you're living in a rural community, has Trump increased the number of health hospitals and clinics in your rural community or damaged them with his big ugly bill? You know the answer to that. Rural hospitals looking at shutting down, premiums skyrocketing because of the discontinuation of the Affordable Care Act subsidies. He's hurt you. Do not reward people who have hurt you. Don't believe that your neighbor who doesn't live where you live, doesn't look the way you look, doesn't go to church the way you go to church, doesn't love the way you love. Don't think that that is a barrier. That's an important thing to hold against somebody. Find the commonality in the humanity. Get the vote out. Reach out. And get and look. I'm not even going to tell people to vote for it. They know who to vote for. You know. But
And
as we
Brent,
wrap up, can I just invoke
please, please, please.
can I invoke the name of Lyndon Johnson, who was, I don't know, he was a great president in many ways, not a perfect president, but he's a great president and probably passed more civil rights legislation than even JFK or others. And he said famously, if you can convince the lowest white man that he's better than the best black man, you can pick his pocket. Apply that to immigrants. Apply that to LGBTQ. Apply that to transgender. Apply that to women. Apply that, apply it widely. Not don't leave it just on race. Leave it on any of the ways that they divide us. And what you will find is that this guy with all of the ching ching is trying to set us against each other for his benefit, right? And what we need to do is come together like that, and we will have a better, stronger society. I'm telling you, friends, an America where we have young people who can afford to buy homes and don't have to worry about student loans. We have an America where there will health care for everybody is right within our grasp. We just got to decide that that's what we're going to do. And we got to decide that maybe Elon Musk does not need another tax cut. Maybe Zuckerberg has enough money. Maybe Thiel has enough money. Maybe they don't need one more tax break. And maybe you need some child care, and you need some subsidies to help your farm stay afloat, and you need to get education. And if you do these things, we can make America a stronger place than it's ever been. But we need to be brave now. We need to be tough now. And we need to come together right now. Just like Renee Good and Alex Preddy came for their neighbors. Let's follow their fine example and stand together with our neighbors right this moment. Katie Couric, I'll see you next
Keith,
time,
hey,
boss.
hey, Keith, with that speech, I think people might be thinking, why isn't Keith Ellison running for president?
Oh, because I got a day job. I am the poor, honest lawyer representing the people of Minnesota, and that's what I'm gonna do.
And before we go, and I'm going to let you go, Brenda is saying we need to be connected to a group. It would be great, because people hear what they can do, but then it's hard for them to take that next step. Who do
Right.
they call? Who do they reach out to? So I would love to, maybe I can work with your office. We can put them on my social media, my newsletter, on all these platforms, these organizations that people can reach out to right
Right.
now.
And I can put you in touch with some people, but I just want everybody listening to know that because I regulate charities.
Right. No, we're not even
Yeah,
talking about charities. I'm talking about organizations where
got you.
election protection, get out the
Oh,
vote efforts.
well, you know what? Let's work together, and we'll get you some good, solid lists. But I
I
mean,
know,
look,
like the Brennan Center, for
the
example.
Brennan Center. But let me tell you this: if you call Mark Elias, he's going to show up. Nobody's going to tell Katie Couric, "I'm not coming on your show." So call up
Oh,
Mark.
you'd be surprised, Keith.
Really? Well, wow. But Holder, Mark Elias, um, and Norm Eisen, Joanna Ludgate. Uh, there's these folks are really into doing that right now. Democracy Defenders. There are different groups that are doing it. We'll get you a list because we definitely need people to come up, and we need a nice solid list so people can volunteer, they can donate, they can get involved. But look, folks, you're gonna blink and it's gonna be November. We need to get ready for these elections right now, as
All
my
right.
say. All right.
Well, Keith,
See you later.
thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
You got it. See you,
Okay.
Katie.
Take care. Bye. Okay. Hold on, everybody, as we say goodbye to Keith. This has been so stressful because my charger isn't working and I have 3%. But hi, everyone. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for joining us today. That was very inspiring to hear from Keith Ellison, I thought. Love to hear your comments, trying to get to your questions. I've kind of jerry rigged this setup. I just got here. Uh, Early this afternoon or late this morning, but I wanted to tell you about our book club selection before we go. I'm going to Pasadena because I'm going to a Stand Up to Cancer Scientific Summit where some of the best cancer researchers from across the country gather and talk about their latest science and research. And that's where I'm going to be spending the weekend. But before I do, I wanted to let you know this was because so many of you suggested this book. So the good news is a lot of you have already read it. I am about halfway through. The book club selection for February is, drum roll please, Theo of Golden. You all have been talking about this book, and I feel like it is a really interesting story. The author is Alan Levy. He's an attorney, judge, singer, songwriter, author. He lives on and cares for family acreage near a small town in middle Georgia. Theo of Golden is his first novel. He put it out in the world, I think, in 2023, and then it was bought by a larger publisher. It has been extremely popular. So many people I know, not only people who I know through Substack, but personal friends of mine have read it and have encouraged me to read it. It's really about legacy, it's about connection, it's about giving back. to a community, and doing some of the things that actually Keith Ellison talked about, and making connections. And as Brian Stevenson, my team will laugh because I always talk about Brian Stevenson because I have such a crush on him, but he talks about the importance of being proximate, the importance of meeting people who are different than you are and being in their orbit, which I think was Keith Ellison was talking about as well. Anyway, Alan Levy is, I hope I'm saying Alan Levy's last name, Levi Levy, is going to be our guest next month. I don't know if we have a date yet, but it will be probably the third week in February. So if you haven't read Theo of Golden, read it. And yeah, that's our February selection. So I hope you all are happy with that. And I'm really enjoying the book. As I said, I'm about halfway through and looking forward to finishing it before, obviously, I talk to Alan. All right. So I have to head to Pasadena now for the scientific summit. I'll tell you all about it hopefully next week. And again, thank you all so much for being a part of this. I always do this pitch. It's so obnoxious. My parents taught me not to talk about money. It's impolite. But if any of you want to be a paid subscriber, it takes a village, as we say. I've got an extraordinary team of producers and writers and people who work really hard at our media company. We have almost 40 people who work there. And so, it's great to have some support for all the work that they do that helps us be a thriving, independent media organization. So if any of you all feel like it, no pressure, but feel like, I think it's $7 a month. And if you want to be a paid subscriber, just go out without that Starbucks coffee maybe once a week or twice a week. Who knows? But anyway, we'd be very grateful if you felt like it. Anyway, I have to head out. But thanks again. This has been, as I said, very stressful because I don't have the proper charger and I don't know what's going on. I'm at my daughter's house, and I'm really happy because my grandson is upstairs taking a nap, and I was really concerned that he was going to come down and want to be a part of this conversation because I think he'd be curious what we were doing. He's really, really cute, by the way. He is really cute. Anyway, okay, I'm babbling now, but thanks again for joining us, and I'll see you soon. Okay, bye, everyone.